The war in Ukraine has just crossed a red line that the Kremlin has sworn to be the point of no return. For more than 1,000 days, Vladimir Putin operated under a comfortable premise that destruction would be an exclusive privilege of Ukrainian soil. But as you watch this video, this artificial security bubble has been pulverized. Western-supplied long-range missiles, technologies that were once kept under lock and key for fear of global escalation, are now tearing through Russian skies and hitting targets in the strategic heart of the Federation. We are not just talking about border checkpoints, we are talking about critical refineries, fortified ammunition depots, and command and control centers that the Russian top brass considered absolutely untouchable. But what appeared to be a brilliant tactical victory for Kiev set off a deafening alarm in Brussels, Berlin, and especially Warsaw. Vladimir Putin's response was not the usual empty nuclear rhetoric we have heard in recent years. This time, the tone changed to something much darker and more immediate. The Kremlin has redirected its propaganda machine and its military vectors towards a direct and brutal threat against the European continent. Are we facing the prelude to a continental conflict? And is Europe prepared for what comes next? Stay with us until the end, because today, we're going to reveal the hidden details of how Ukraine's deep attack strategy is forcing Europe to turn into an armed fortress overnight, and why intelligence analysts believe the time for diplomacy is not only over, it's also been incinerated. For nearly 3 years, Russia operated with an unfair and devastating advantage. Moscow could choose any coordinate on the map of Ukraine and send a shower of Kh-101 missiles or Shahed drones, while Russian territory remained an untouched sanctuary, protected by a tacit no-escalation agreement with the West. That agreement is dead. With the arrival of advanced cruise missiles, and more importantly, the development of Ukrainian long-range domestic drones with artificial intelligence, Kiev began to bring war home. And the reality that the Russians encountered when they opened the door was devastating. Admission from within the system itself is the clearest sign of weakness. Retired colonel and military analyst Mikhail Khodoryanuk shocked the audience of Russian state TV with a brutal confession. Most of the Russian Federation no longer has a significant air defense. Putin concentrated his S-400 and Pantsir systems around his mansions and Red Square, leaving the country's industrial sector completely exposed.
The case of the port of Luga is the most poignant example of this collapse. A vital hub for oil exports, the blood that runs through the veins of the Russian economy, the port burned for 5 consecutive days. The flames didn't just consume infrastructure, they consumed millions of dollars from the Kremlin's budget every hour. Every explosion at a Russian refinery is one less nail in the production of tanks and missiles for the front line. This exposed vulnerability has generated something unprecedented in the Putin era: open and fierce criticism. On state TV, where every word is usually choreographed, analysts have begun to compare the military competence of the defense ministry to comedy characters. Paranoia in the Kremlin has reached fever pitches. Our intelligence sources confirm that Putin ordered surgical internet blackouts in Moscow and St. Petersburg. The official reason? Technical maintenance. The reality? The absolute fear that disgruntled officers or military factions will use encrypted messaging apps to coordinate a coup d'etat while the Tsar is distracted trying to put out fires at his refineries. The Russian rear is no longer safe, neither against Ukrainian missiles nor against its own people. Vladimir Putin is a leader shaped by KGB doctrine. That is, when your strength is questioned internally, you must project an even greater threat externally. Seeing its defenses humiliated by Ukrainian missiles, the Kremlin did not back down. Instead, he redirected his fury to the nerve center that allows Ukraine to continue fighting: Europe. But there is one country that decided that it would not be the next victim on Moscow's imperialist menu: Poland. Feeling the icy breath of war on his neck, Warsaw made the most brutal and decisive decision in its modern history. It's not just about diplomacy. It is about biological survival and total sovereignty. Warsaw has just closed its eastern airspace in a way never before seen in NATO. An electronic death zone, an exclusion zone, has been created where the rule is simple and terrifying. Everything that appears on the radar without authorization becomes an immediate target. Why this extreme measure? The answer lies in Putin's hybrid war tactics. For months, Russia has tested European nerves by sending high-altitude spy balloons and the new Gerbera drones. Simplified, inexpensive versions of the Shahed, just to map the response times of Western radars. Poland put an end to that game. By banning all civil and sports flights within a range of hundreds of kilometers, the Poles removed the noise. Now, if something flies in that zone, it is Russian and must be destroyed. The strategic objective of this maneuver is a masterstroke that has left Putin's generals in panic: the total isolation of Kaliningrad. This enclave, often called Putin's dagger at Europe's throat, is now caught in a geographical trap. With the skies closed by Poland and the seas monitored by Sweden and Finland, the new members of NATO, the Russian airlift to Kaliningrad was cut. Russia has responded with desperation, sending existential threat messages, but Poland is not listening. Warsaw is building the most lethal army of the 21st century. While the rest of Europe debated budgets, Poles raised defense spending to a whopping 4.8% of GDP. They are not just buying guns. They are buying an entire fleet of F-35 fighters and thousands of South Korean K-2 tanks to ensure that if Putin decides to test the border, the response will not be a note of protest, but a technological wall of fire. But make no mistake, the Kremlin still has wicked cards to play. Moscow has launched a large-scale electronic sabotage campaign, interfering with the GPS signal of commercial airliners across the Baltic Sea. It's a silent message. If we can't fly safely, no one will. We are witnessing the birth of a new Iron Curtain, but this time it is not made of cement and barbed wire. It's made up of jammed radio frequencies, active scanning radars, and a military readiness that Europe hasn't seen since the darkest days of the Cold War. Putin tried to intimidate Europe into abandoning Ukraine, but the result was the opposite. He created a Polish fortress that now serves as an impenetrable shield for the rest of the continent. As Europe encloses itself in steel armor, a new and unexpected player has entered the Eurasian chessboard, coming from thousands of miles away: Japan. To many, Tokyo's participation in Ukraine's defense may seem like a geographical anomaly, but in the world of high-precision geopolitics, it makes perfect sense. Japan has understood that the defeat of Russian aggression in Europe is the only way to deter similar adventures in the Pacific. But what Japan brought to the table was not heavy tanks or ballistic missiles. It was something far more dangerous for Putin's future: low-cost, asymmetric intelligence. In March 2025, a historic pact was sealed between Japanese tech giant Terra-Drone Corporation and Ukrainian defense firm Amazing Drones. The result of this union is the Terra A1, an interceptor drone that is rewriting the laws of economic physics in modern warfare. Putin's calculation has always been based on exhaustion. He sends hundreds of Iranian Shahed drones, which cost about $20,000, to force Ukraine to fire Patriot or Iris-T missiles, which cost between $2 million and $4 million per unit. It is a war of attrition where the West's wallet would bleed before the Russian arsenal. This Japanese-Ukrainian predator costs only $2,000 and uses artificial intelligence to hunt and destroy Russian drones in the sky through direct impact. For the first time in war, it is cheaper to defend than to attack. This technological asymmetry is breaking Putin's strategy of exhaustion. If Russia can no longer saturate Ukrainian defenses, its huge army of drones suddenly becomes useless. But the Kremlin's humiliation does not stop here. Japanese sensor technology allows these interceptor drones to work in fully jammed GPS environments, a direct response to the Russian electronic warfare we mentioned earlier. While Russian missiles are blinded by Polish and Ukrainian interference, Kiev's defense swarms continue to see in the dark. The question now echoing in the intelligence corridors in Washington and Tokyo is, if Russia loses its economic air supremacy, what is left for it? The answer is grim. Without the ability to terrorize Ukrainian and European cities with saturation attacks, Putin is forced to look to his nuclear arsenal or even more desperate alliances with North Korea. This is the real technological checkmate. Ukraine and its Asian allies are not just winning battles. They are making the Russian way of waging war financially unsustainable. Japan did not send troops. but sent the end of the Russian advantage. And in the Kremlin, the silence on how to deal with this technological invasion is the clearest sign yet that Putin is running out of options. The scenario before our eyes is not just a change in tactics. It is the end of an era. The Europe we knew, the garden of peace that believed that economic interdependence would prevent barbarism, ceased to exist. In its place, an entity is emerging that future historians will call the Continental Fortress. Poland's Eastern Shield project is the ultimate proof that the continent is preparing for the worst-case scenario. It's not just about digging anti-tank trenches. We are talking about an integrated network of artificial intelligence sensors, intelligent minefields that only activate on command, and electronic warfare systems capable of frying the circuits of any Russian missile before it even crosses the border. Putin tried to use fear as a weapon to divide Europe, but what he achieved was the fastest and most coordinated militarization in NATO's history. Vladimir Putin is now trapped in a trap that he built himself. He is trapped between a battlefront that no longer advances, an economy that bleeds billions under Ukraine's far-reaching attacks, and a Russian elite that is beginning to question whether the price of victory will not be the total destruction of Russia itself. But this is precisely where the greatest danger lies. History teaches us that a cornered authoritarian leader, whose legacy is disintegrating, is the most unpredictable of enemies. Will the new technological Iron Curtain be enough to contain Russian aggression? Or are we just witnessing the prologue to a direct and inevitable clash between NATO and the Kremlin, where Ukrainian long-range missiles were only the fuse of a much larger explosion? The fate of Europe and the balance of world power are now being decided, not only at negotiating tables in distant capitals, but in drone hangars in Kiev, in sensor factories in Tokyo, and in the technological trenches of the Polish border. Ukraine has proven that Putin's sanctuary is an illusion. Europe has proved that its isolation is a weapon. But the question we leave for you, which has accompanied us in this in-depth analysis, is this: are Ukraine's long-range attacks the final key to the liberation of the continent, or the trigger that will lead us to a conflict of global proportions? Are we on the way to peace through force, or is the world about to enter a geopolitical winter from which there will be no return? The board continues to move, and we will be here to decipher every move. If this analysis has given you a perspective that you won't find in traditional media, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and above all, share your opinion in the comments. Your vision helps us to build this map of truth. Thank you for choosing us and for being at the forefront of information. See you in the next video.